Few people know that during World War II, efforts to stop the Nazi regime came not only from abroad, on the front lines of battle, but also from within Germany itself. In Berlin, in close proximity to Adolf Hitler, there were individuals who sought to hasten the end of the war from the very heart of the Reich. This video tells the story of one of the boldest and most determined attempts to dismantle the Nazi leadership from within, Operation Valkyrie. Today, I'll tell you everything about this courageous operation. It's going to be fascinating. You won't be left indifferent. Summer 1944. Germany still appears to be a mighty empire, stretching from Norway to Greece, from France to Ukraine. Newspapers flash bold headlines. The Führer holds the Eastern Front. New wonder weapons will soon turn the tide. Military marches echo through the streets of Berlin. Children collect scrap metal for the army, and cinemas show films about the heroism of German soldiers. But behind this facade of confidence lies what cannot be printed in the papers: exhaustion, fear, and the growing awareness of an approaching end. The fronts are collapsing. In the east, the Red Army has launched Operation Bagration and is literally sweeping away German divisions in Belarus. In the west, the Allies have landed in Normandy and are advancing toward the Rhine. Every night, hundreds of bombs fall from the sky, turning cities into ruins. The Luftwaffe can no longer protect the skies. Tanks fail to reach the front lines in time, and soldiers write home letters filled with hopelessness. Under these conditions, a thought begins to take root in the army and government circles. A thought that just a year ago would have been considered blasphemous. Hitler is leading Germany to ruin. His decisions are increasingly unpredictable, his orders irrational. He demands that positions be held to the last soldier, executes commanders who dare to retreat, and suspects even his closest allies of betrayal. A cult has been built around the Führer, but that cult is cracking. Many officers of the Wehrmacht are not fanatics, but professional soldiers of the old school, raised on ideals of honor, discipline, and duty. They see how the army is losing its integrity, how officers are forced to carry out criminal orders, how the Gestapo increasingly arrests not enemies, but German citizens. For them, the question is no longer political. It is a matter of conscience. One of those who can no longer tolerate what is happening is Colonel Klaus Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg. He comes from an old aristocratic family, descended from soldiers and diplomats, a man of deep convictions. Before the war, he was devoted to the idea of Germany's revival, believing that Hitler could restore the nation's dignity after its defeat in World War I. But like many, he realized too late the price of this greatness. On the front, Stauffenberg witnessed atrocities, destruction, and senseless losses. In 1943, he was severely wounded in North Africa, losing his right hand, 2 fingers on his left, and an eye. After a long recovery, he returned not only as a soldier, but as a man who had decided that true patriotism meant refusing to obey a madman. At the same time, a circle of like-minded individuals was forming in Berlin and at the front: officers, diplomats, priests, even officials from ministries. Among them was General Ludwig Beck, former chief of the General Staff, who had warned as early as 1938, Hitler will lead Germany to catastrophe. There was also Colonel Henning von Treschow, an intellectual strategist, a man who had already tried to kill the Führer years earlier, but failed to carry out the plan. These people gathered in the shadows, in offices, in homes outside Berlin, in private conversations during military meetings. Their discussions were brief, cautious, but each carried tension like the moment before a gunshot. If we do nothing, Germany will perish. This is not murder, it's a surgical operation. History will not forgive inaction. Gradually from these conversations, a plan began to form, one that would receive the code name Valkyrie. But for now, it was only an idea. The conspirators understood. Killing Hitler was not enough. They had to seize power within hours, or the SS and the party would crush any uprising. This required not just an assassination, but a precise plan, with every step timed to the minute. Meanwhile, speeches from the Führer continued to echo through Berlin. He remained convinced that destiny was on his side, that the German spirit would endure any storm. But behind his back, a network was already growing, of those willing to risk everything. They did not yet know who would pull the trigger, who would deliver the bomb, who would give the orders. But they knew one thing. If Hitler survived, Germany would not. In the evenings, Stauffenberg wrote short, almost prayer-like lines in his diary. Life demands action. When silence becomes complicity, it is time to act. This phrase would become his inner motto. With each passing day, he understood more clearly. The fate of the country now lay in the hands of those willing to break their oath to save its honor. And while headquarters continued to draw arrows across maps of the front, something far more dangerous than the Allied army was being born in the depths of Berlin. A conspiracy that aimed to change the course of German history, or destroy those who dared to turn it back. Klaus von Stauffenberg was raised in an aristocratic family where the word honor was not a rhetorical flourish, but a way of life. His upbringing, early military service, and the traditions of the Prussian officer corps shaped his understanding of duty, in which the concepts of oath and moral responsibility often went hand in hand. In the 1930s, like many of his fellow officers, he initially welcomed Germany's national revival, but not at the cost of blind obedience to any authority. On the battlefields of World War II, ideals quickly shattered against reality. Stauffenberg saw order turned into arbitrariness, decisions dictated by ideology rather than military logic, orders that inflicted irreparable harm on both the army and the civilian population. In North Africa, he experienced a turning point, a severe injury in 1943, a shrapnel blast that cost him his right hand, 2 fingers on his left, and 1 eye. In the hospital, he had time to reflect, not only on his body, but on the fate of his country. Physical vulnerability coincided with moral awakening. Trust in the leadership was fading. Stauffenberg's central conflict was not political in the narrow sense. He was not a revolutionary, nor did he seek social reform. His dilemma was a clash between loyalty to the Führer and responsibility to the people and the professional honor of an officer. The oath demanded obedience, but when that oath becomes a tool of mass crime and national self-destruction, a responsible person must ask, whom do I truly serve? This dilemma did not arise in a vacuum. As early as the late 1930s and throughout the war, a group of professional officers, former and active members of the General Staff, old Prussian generals, publicly and privately expressed doubts about the regime's policies. General Ludwig Beck openly predicted disaster, warning in 1938 that aggressive foreign policy would lead to Germany's ruin. Henning von Treschow, on the Eastern Front, maintained contacts with exiles and diplomats, building a practical network for action when the time came. For Stauffenberg, this was not just intellectual agreement with the idea of a coup. It was a personal moral turning point. He saw how armies were ordered to hold positions to the last man, while military logic called for retreats and regrouping. How thousands died needlessly, and decisions from above were driven by vengeance and ideology. Crucially, these decisions were not only incompetent, but criminal. Deportations, repression, terrorist actions against civilians and occupied territories. Stauffenberg understood the consequences. A conspiracy was not just a personal risk, it was a chance to change the fate of millions. But the concept of chance carried the weight of responsibility. If the coup failed, it would trigger bloody reprisals and new scenes of brutality. Nevertheless, the accumulated evidence of crimes and the strategic helplessness of the Reich made the choice inevitable. By early 1944, Stauffenberg was no longer alone. A core circle had formed around him, people of different backgrounds but shared convictions. General Beck embodied the arguments of the old guard, the moral duty to end the bloodshed. Helmuth von Moltke and others proposed legal and administrative scenarios. Tresckow maintained external contacts and developed practical mechanisms for regime change. Each contributed to the plan: strategy, reserve connections, ideas for legitimizing a new government. The group also debated the moral dimension. They re-examined the concept of the oath, not as blind loyalty to a person, but as a commitment to the state and the law. In their interpretation, loyalty was inverted. Loyalty to the state required the removal of a criminal leader. Their meetings were pragmatic and grounded. They discussed minute-by-minute plans, communications, security, swift arrests of SS commanders, and control over telegraph and radio stations. As a staff officer, Stauffenberg had an advantage: access to documents, meetings, and the physical ability to be near the Führer. This made him a key figure, not only as the moral architect, but also as the executor. Yet the role of executor required a courageous personal transformation, from patriotic soldier to conspirator, bearer of secrets, and executor of a death sentence against the man he had once sworn allegiance to. This inner shift unfolded through practical and personal stages. He listened to frontline reports, read dispatches about camps and punitive operations, spoke with the wounded and their families. It was not a sudden revelation, but a process of accumulating evidence, reflection, and ultimately, decision. His letters and diaries from that time trace a transition from pride to anxiety, from faith in destiny to the awareness of necessary action. Another aspect was religious and ethical. As a Catholic, Stauffenberg grappled with the legitimacy of killing to save many lives. While some in the circle justified violence as a necessary evil, Stauffenberg sought legitimacy, legal, military, moral. He believed that removing the country's manual control was an act of protecting the common good, not personal revenge. By mid-1944, the plan was no longer a theoretical possibility. It had come to life as a practical strategy. The official system for mobilizing reserve units, called Valkyrie, became the tool for legitimizing the coup. Its use, according to the conspirators' plan, would create the appearance of normal governance and allow swift neutralization of SS forces. But the key element remained the physical elimination of the Führer. This was the step Stauffenberg took with the full weight of his duty and inner struggle: to break his oath in order to fulfill the highest obligation, to save his country. Thus emerged the final stage of moral choice. Not an impulsive crime, but a calculated act shaped as a military operation. Clear understanding of risk, brutal clarity of consequences, and readiness to pay the personal price. These distinguished Stauffenberg from many others. His path from loyal officer to leader of the conspiracy was a journey where honor clashed with oath, and where responsibility to the nation prevailed. Berlin, spring 1944. In the Reich Chancellery, confident speeches still echoed about the unshakable will of the Führer and the inevitable victory of Germany. But beneath this armor of discipline beat another heart, quiet yet resolute. In the basements of ministries, in private apartments, at innocent officer meetings over coffee, something was being born that the Gestapo feared more than any partisan: a conspiracy from within. The plan against Hitler was not the work of a single man. It was a network, complex, contradictory, alive. Some acted out of moral conviction, others out of pragmatism, and still others simply because they understood. Defeat was inevitable, and with it, the destruction of Germany. This network had no central command. It pulsed across dozens of levels, from army headquarters to Berlin departments, from diplomatic salons to monastic libraries, where documents and papers were hidden. The main gathering point became the Bendler Block, the military administration building in central Berlin. By day, routine work buzzed. Orders, reports, briefings. By night, whispered discussions shaped the fate of the world. It was here that Stauffenberg and his allies began turning a dream into a structure. Here emerged names that would later become symbols of German resistance. General Ludwig Beck, a thoughtful strategist and the moral compass of the conspiracy. Colonel Friedrich Olbricht, a man of organization and detail. Henning von Treschow, an intellectual who had already tried to kill Hitler more than once. And General Friedrich Fromm, commander of the Reserve Army. A man whose decision could change everything, yet who played a double game to the end. Each brought something to the table. Beck, authority and legitimacy. Olbricht, administrative capability. Stauffenberg, resolve and access to Hitler himself. Treschow, strategy. Fromm, control over the reserves. Together, they formed the brain of an operation meant to stop the war, dismantle the dictatorship, and create a new government based on law, not fear. But how to act in a country where even the walls could listen? The conspirators knew. Every meeting was a risk. Every document a potential piece of evidence. In the Bendler Block, a special art of conversation emerged. Phrases full of double meanings, notes destroyed immediately after reading, conversations held with the radio on, to drown out any possible recording. Everything was calculated down to the smallest detail, even the habits of the Gestapo. Stauffenberg gradually became the center of gravity. His charisma and determination achieved what no one else could, turning doubt into action. His physical wounds gave weight to his words. Healthy men sat before him, but it was this man, missing a hand and an eye, who said, "If we do not act, we are guilty. If we die with honor." Gradually, from many scattered conversations, a scheme began to take shape. At its core was the Valkyrie plan. The irony was that this operation had originally been approved by Hitler himself. It was designed to suppress internal unrest in the event of a rebellion or uprising by slave laborers and prisoners. But the conspirators decided to use it against its creator. The essence of the plan was elegant. After Hitler's death, they would convince everyone that the SS had launched a coup. Then, according to the Valkyrie plan, the Reserve Army would automatically take control of key sites, ministries, radio stations, telegraphs, depots, headquarters. This would allow the conspirators to seize power within hours and prevent chaos. Work on the plan continued for weeks. In Ulbricht's office, diagrams were drawn, orders drafted, signatures forged, fake telegrams prepared. Every document was kept secret under coded labels. Yet the main difficulty wasn't the paperwork. It was getting close to Hitler himself. His inner circle had become nearly impenetrable. After numerous assassination attempts, access to him was reduced to a minimum. Only a few staff officers could attend meetings at his headquarters, the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia and the Berghof in Bavaria. Stauffenberg was one of those few. His position as Chief of Staff of the Reserve Army opened doors no one else could enter. He realized if anyone could plant the bomb, it was him. Meanwhile, the Gestapo continued to sense danger. It didn't know where it was coming from, but traces of conspiracy surfaced here and there. Treskov narrowly escaped exposure. Molke was arrested for suspicious contacts. Every leak could lead to catastrophe. So decisions were made faster and faster. Time was running out. The Allies had already launched their offensive in France. Soviet troops were advancing toward Warsaw. Hitler increasingly issued orders driven by panic. By summer 1944, it was clear, if not now, then never. Stauffenberg was ready. He carried an explosive device in his briefcase, a small bomb with a British detonator. That briefcase was meant to change the fate of the world. And somewhere in the shadows of the Bendler block, beneath the rustle of papers and the hum of machines, officers were signing their own death warrants, not knowing who among them would live to see the morning. Everything depended on one man, one meeting, and 1 second. July 1944. Berlin is stifling, and not just from the summer heat. The air seems saturated with anxiety. Each day brings news of defeats. The Eastern Front is collapsing. The Red Army is approaching the borders of East Prussia. In the West, the Allies have already broken out of Normandy. And although Nazi propaganda continues to speak of a great turning point, even the most devoted party members feel that this turning point is not in Germany's favor. In the Bendler bloc, tense silence reigns. Stauffenberg and his closest allies know. Everything now depends on a few days, perhaps hours. The Valkyrie plan is ready. The documents have been meticulously rewritten, all orders prepared. They only need to be signed and sent. Every step is mapped out. After the Führer's elimination, the reserve army is activated. Berlin is secured. Ministries, radio stations, and the SS are neutralized. But the most crucial point, the one upon which everything else depends, is terrifyingly simple. The Führer must be dead. Colonel Stauffenberg has lived with this point for the past few weeks. He now looks almost like a symbol of Germany itself, strong, proud, but maimed. His figure, with a bandaged arm, an eye patch, and a briefcase in his intact hand, evokes both respect and unease. He barely sleeps. Sometimes he's seen walking briskly down the corridor, clutching his arm to his side, as if the device no one should know about is already there. Every detail matters. A meeting with Hitler can only be scheduled by special summons, and due to the constant movement of his headquarters, no one knows when or where the opportunity will arise. The operation has already been postponed several times. Hitler changed plans, meetings were rescheduled, or briefcases were suddenly banned from the conference room. But Stauffenberg is stubborn. He knows there's no more time to wait. Every day of delay means hundreds more dead at the front. He convinces himself that his duty is not merely to kill a dictator, but to save the country from total annihilation. His closest ally, General Friedrich Olbricht, is responsible for the coup's mechanism. At the moment of the explosion, he must activate Valkyrie, sending orders across Germany that the SS has attempted a coup, and the army must take control. But for this to be convincing, the order must come from the Reserve Army's command itself, and its formal head is General Friedrich Fromm, a cautious, cunning, and as it turns out, unpredictable man. Fromm knows about the impending plot, but does not interfere. He waits. If it succeeds, he'll be among Germany's saviors. If it fails, he'll claim ignorance. This double game makes him more dangerous than an enemy. He could betray them at any moment. Meanwhile, Stauffenberg rehearses the moment of the meeting several times. He studies the layout of the rooms, the order of the conferences, the Führer's route. His only chance is to place the briefcase with the bomb under the table next to Hitler during the briefing. Then, calmly leave the room under the pretext of a phone call. 10 minutes later, the device is supposed to detonate. But even physically, this is no easy task. He can only use one hand. So the British detonator with a timed fuse must be activated with his teeth, pressing it against his knee and the stump of his left arm. One of his aides, Oberstleutnant Werner von Haften, takes on the task of helping prepare the device just before the meeting. Everything is heading toward a climax. By mid-July, the date of the operation is set. Hitler is to hold a conference at his headquarters, Wolfschanze, the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. The location is surrounded by swamps, concrete bunkers, security systems, and patrols. Getting in is nearly impossible. But for Stauffenberg, it's an official visit. He is to report on the state of the Reserve Army and deliver new mobilization documents. On the night of July 19th, Stauffenberg sets out. He sits silently on the train, holding a brown briefcase. No one suspects that inside are two small cylinders wrapped in brown paper and soaked with the scent of plastic explosives. He doesn't eat or drink. He stares out the window at the forests and fields of East Prussia, grim, cold, as if the land itself is preparing to witness something inevitable. In his mind, there are no speeches or slogans, only a simple thought. After the Führer's breakfast, Germany will be different, or it won't exist at all. In the morning, upon arriving at the Wolfschanze, he appears composed and calm. Soldiers at the gate salute. No one notices that along with the documents, death lies in the briefcase. Stauffenberg heads to the meeting. All that remains is to wait for the moment when he is alone with the briefcase. Meanwhile, in Berlin, at the Bendler block, his allies sit by the phone. The hours pass agonizingly slowly. Everything is ready. Orders printed, people in position, officers awaiting the signal. Only one word needs to be spoken over the line. The Führer is dead. But while Berlin holds its breath, somewhere in the forests of East Prussia, the briefcase carrying the fate of the world inches closer to the table where the man whose name became a symbol of 20th century horror is standing. Morning of July 20th, 1944. East Prussia awakens under the heavy scent of pine and metal. At the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's command headquarters, everything runs according to schedule. Guards check documents, officers pass through several checkpoints, dogs sniff briefcases. This place is the embodiment of control. Nothing happens here by accident, and yet on this day, a man enters the headquarters carrying chaos, hidden in a leather briefcase. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg arrives at the compound around 11 a.m. He is greeted by duty officers and escorted to the conference building. Everything seems routine. A hot day, humid air, mosquitoes swarming at the entrance, secretaries distributing folders. No one knows that inside the briefcase are 2 plastic charges, carefully disguised as documents. According to the plan, the meeting was supposed to take place in a concrete bunker, where the acoustics and enclosed space would amplify the blast effect. But the morning heat altered history. Hitler ordered the meeting moved to a wooden barrack with open windows for better ventilation. This decision, made almost mechanically, would change the course of events, and possibly the war itself. Stauffenberg enters the room prepared for the briefing. With him is his aide, Lieutenant Werner von Haften. They lock themselves in for a few minutes. There, behind the closed door, a scene unfolds that will later be spoken of in whispers. Stauffenberg takes out the briefcase, places it on the table, removes one of the 2 charges, and begins to arm it. The timer detonator, of British design, obtained at great risk, requires the crushing of a thin acid ampule, which will burn through a copper tube in 10 minutes and release the firing pin. Stauffenberg, having lost his right hand and 2 fingers on his left, does this with his teeth, pressing the detonator against his knee. Nearby, Haften assists, counting the minutes. The ticking is barely audible, but to them it sounds like the countdown of fate. 10 minutes, 5, 3. He hides the armed charge in the briefcase. The second charge, due to lack of time, remains untouched. Stauffenberg casts a quick glance at it, as if saying goodbye to the chance of guaranteed success. Now he must play the role of an officer reporting to the Führer. Around 12:30, he is invited into the conference room. About 24 people are present: generals, adjutants, stenographers. In the center, a long wooden table covered in maps. Hitler stands at the edge, slightly bent over the papers, one hand resting on his belt. His face is pale, shadows under his eyes from sleepless nights. But as always, he radiates a cold energy of power. Stauffenberg places the briefcase next to him, between the legs of officers, near the massive leg of the table. The briefing begins. He speaks calmly, confidently. No one notices how his gaze constantly drifts toward the briefcase. The ticking is heard only in his head. After a few minutes, he utters the prearranged phrase, "Excuse me, my Führer, I need to make a call to Berlin." Hitler barely nods. Stauffenberg exits the room. He walks quickly, almost without breathing. Haften follows, trying to appear composed. Outside, they descend the stairs and head toward the car. The seconds drag painfully. 9th minute. 10th. Suddenly, a flash of light, a roar like a hammer striking iron. The air trembles. Flames burst from the wooden barrack. Windows shatter outward. Clouds of smoke rise into the sky. People scream. The ground shakes beneath their feet. Stauffenberg closes his eyes for a moment. He doesn't turn around. He is certain the mission is accomplished. The car drives out of the Wolf's Lair gates. Soldiers shout, run toward the blast site, but no one thinks to detain the officer who just spoke with the Führer. In his pocket lies the word that is supposed to save Germany. The Führer is dead. He rushes to the airfield, boards a plane bound for Berlin. In his mind, only one sound, the ticking that has stopped forever. Meanwhile, in the wooden barrack, amid smoke, dust, and debris, beneath piles of wreckage, Hitler is alive. He was thrown from the table, but the massive leg between him and the briefcase absorbed the blast. 4 people died. Several were wounded. But the Führer, as if defying the laws of probability, escaped with burns and a concussion. Within minutes, he is already standing, brushing off dust, and hoarsely says, "I'm alive. This was an assassination attempt." Berlin does not yet know this, and Stauffenberg is already on his way to the capital, convinced that history has changed. Midday over Berlin was scorching, like molten metal. The city bustled with wartime urgency. Columns of trucks, anxious reports, ringing telephones. But inside the building on Bendlerstrasse, home to the Army High Command, the air pulsed with a strange vibration, tense anticipation. Inside sat those preparing to change the course of history. Officers, officials, signalmen. They waited for one message. The Führer is dead. It was to be the signal to launch Operation Valkyrie, a plan officially designed to suppress potential uprisings by forced laborers and civil unrest in the event of Hitler's death. But in reality, it was meant to be the mechanism of a coup. And then, around 1 p.m., a call reaches headquarters. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg has arrived at the airport and reports that the Führer is dead. The explosion was powerful. No one could have survived. These words surge through the room like an electric current. The men, moments ago frozen in suspense, come alive. Generals straighten their shoulders, signalmen grab phones. It's time to act. The Valkyrie order is activated. Telegrams are sent to commands in Paris, Prague, Vienna. Officers not privy to the plot are puzzled, but the order sounds official. The Führer is dead. Power transfers to the army. Suppress SS resistance. Meanwhile, Stauffenberg is flying to Berlin. The plane hums, the engine trembles, but inside him, a strange calm. It's done. It worked. He is convinced Germany has been saved. In his mind, the words echo, "Now the madness ends." He recalls the fallen on the front lines, the ruined cities, the children beneath rubble. And it seems to him that he has not committed a crime, but performed an act of redemption. When he arrives in the capital around 4 p.m., the headquarters is buzzing. Officers prepare orders, phone lines are overloaded. People who yesterday swore loyalty to the Führer now search for someone to follow. But in this sea of enthusiasm, a thin crack appears. There is no confirmation. The Führer is dead. But where is the body? Where are the photographs? Where is the evidence? Questions begin to whisper in corners. Then the first troubling signals arrive. From East Prussia comes word. The headquarters is destroyed, but Hitler is alive. He spoke with Keitel, plans to make a statement. These words hit the headquarters like stones in water. At first, no one believes it. Then, silence. Then, shock. Stauffenberg refuses to accept it. He says, "This is a lie. Disinformation. We must see it through." He orders Valkyrie to continue. SS leadership in Berlin is arrested. Military patrols are sent to ministries. Chaos erupts in the streets. Officers don't know who is on whose side. Phone lines are overwhelmed with conflicting orders. By evening, the conspiracy begins to unravel. Generals, seeing hesitation, begin to doubt. Some say they should wait, others that all is lost. Then comes a radio broadcast from Hitler's headquarters. The announcer's voice trembles, but each word lands like a hammer blow. Today at noon, a group of criminals from the army attempted to assassinate the Führer. By miraculous providence, he survived and continues to lead the Reich. At that moment, a shockwave seems to pass through Berlin. Everyone understands. It's over. Faces turn pale. Some silently remove their insignia, some tear up papers, others simply sit and stare into emptiness. Stauffenberg stands by the window. Outside, darkness falls. A distant siren wails over the city. He remains silent for a long time, then quietly says, "We did what we could." But history has already decided otherwise. Hitler lives, and now his revenge will be merciless. Beyond the headquarters, the roar of engines grows. SS units are approaching the building. Inside, the lamps still burn, and beneath them, the faces of those who tried to change Germany's fate. Some still hope for a miracle. But on this evening, miracles will not be on their side. Twilight descended on Berlin slowly, as if reluctant to witness what was about to unfold. The last rays of sun entered the headquarters on Bendlerstrasse, falling across papers, telephones, and weapons scattered on desks. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, paper, and anxiety. A strange blend of ending and despair. After the radio broadcast from Hitler's headquarters, everything began to change with terrifying speed. Just an hour earlier, people here had spoken of a new Germany, of a government without a dictator. Now, footsteps, whispers, the clatter of weapons. Some officers hurriedly left the building, as if the walls themselves might betray them. Others stayed, as if out of stubbornness. Stauffenberg stood at the window, gazing into the dark sky. He looked tired, but there was no fear in his face. His eyes, hard as steel, reflected only one thought. "We tried. We could not have done otherwise." Cries echoed through the corridors. SS units had surrounded the building. Soldiers under Wolf and Middeldorf, who had only recently followed the orders of the conspirators, were now switching sides. Telephone lines were cut, like threads severed by fate. General Friedrich Olbricht tried to maintain order. He gathered officers and spoke in a hoarse voice. "Gentlemen, it's not over yet. We must hold on." But everyone knew it was over. Hitler was alive. The army remained loyal to him, and within minutes, soldiers would enter, men for whom the word order meant more than truth. Stauffenberg walked down the corridor like a man who had only dignity left. He paused briefly beside a secretary, a young woman with a pale face, and calmly said, "Don't be afraid. This will end quickly." Around 10:30 p.m., SS trucks approached the building. Headlights flashed in the darkness. Boots struck the asphalt. SS officers entered, ordering weapons to be surrendered. A few minutes, a brief exchange of fire, screams, and then silence. It was decided. Stauffenberg, Olbricht, Werner von Haften, and Albrecht Merz von Quirnheim were led into the inner courtyard. The clock read around midnight. The courtyard smelled of earth and gasoline. The sky was black, starless. Soldiers set up floodlights, their beams striking directly into the eyes. A few SS officers read the execution order. The words sounded muffled, as if from underground. No one listened. Stauffenberg stood tall, asking for nothing. His figure, calm, composed, like a man who had already crossed the threshold. Before the shots rang out, he managed to say just a few words, quietly but firmly, "Long live sacred Germany." A volley of gunfire. The echo vanished into the darkness, bouncing off the walls, as if the night itself remembered the sound. Thus ended Operation Valkyrie, Germany's last attempt to free itself from within. At dawn, the bodies of the executed would be secretly removed, the traces washed away, the papers burned. But their memory would not disappear. Later, one of the officers present at the execution would say, "He died like a soldier." But in his death, there was something more. as if a man was departing who had tried to restore honor to his country. And Hitler, upon learning of the failed plot, would fly into a rage, launching mass purges and thousands of arrests. But even he understood. That night in Berlin, a crack had formed, through which the thought entered the heart of the Reich. Not everyone in Germany was with him. Berlin greeted the dawn in silence, tense and watchful. Just yesterday, rumors of hope and change had circulated through the city, but today everything had returned to familiar fear. After the failed coup, arrests began, strict, wordless, as if the regime itself had decided to erase from memory those who dared to act. Across Germany, in Munich, Hamburg, Vienna, doors were knocked on. Officers, officials, engineers. People were summoned for interrogations, questioned, searched for traces of involvement. Some truly knew about the plot. Others had simply been nearby. The country was once again weighed down by suspicion. Hitler, having survived the assassination attempt, was convinced that Providence itself had protected him. Newspapers wrote of a miracle. Propaganda called the event a sign of destiny. Many believed it. After years of war, people wanted to see meaning, some kind of sign that everything was under control. Meanwhile, in Berlin and other cities, high-profile trials were underway. They became more theatrical than truthful, public spectacles rather than a search for justice. Those who found themselves in the defendant's seat were labeled traitors, agitators, rebels. Yet even there in those courtrooms, some maintained remarkable composure, as if they knew that history would one day judge them differently. Within weeks, hundreds were arrested. Many lost their positions, families, homes. And yet, alongside this, a quiet realization began to take root in Germany. Not everyone in the country agreed with what was happening. Somewhere, among grey walls and closed offices, conscience still lived. Stauffenberg and his comrades were gone, but their act, the attempt to halt the path of destruction, remained in memory. Hitler, it seemed, had won. But after Valkyrie, his power became something else. Tense, nervous, built not on belief, but on fear. With each passing month, the war drew closer to its inevitable end, and in the very heart of Germany, a quiet thought echoed more often. What if they were right? When, a year later, the city lay in ruins, the Allies found among the archives a folder labeled Valkyrie Top Secret. And in that folder, covered in dust, remained the story of people who dared the impossible. They did not live to see peace, but they left behind something that could not be destroyed, not by time, nor by fear. The example that even in the darkest days, a person can choose honor.